Hello. How are you today? How are you doing? I hope you're having a good day. If you've seen any of these videos before, this is the mid-year book Freakout tag. I love this. I love watching other people do this because I think it gives you a really good sense of somebody's reading taste. And it lets you know about some books that have come out this year or that have read this year that I really enjoyed, and some that I didn't enjoy. So stay tuned for that. Am I doing a mid-year book Freakout tag before I do a YouTube newbie tag? Yes, I am. Why am I doing that? Because I feel like it. Imaginary person policing my video making right now. So where to start? Question 1. What was the best book of 2020 for you so far? I had a hard time thinking about this one because actually I've had such a good reading year. I have read so many amazing books this year that I have 5 on my list that I want to talk about. So I might do like a top 5 best books. So in no particular order, I have Felix Ever After by Kacen Callendar. I just hit that lamp. This is, I just realised my lights aren't on. Is that better? It's fine. It's fine. Felix Ever After by Kacen Callendar. This book was so good. It's so full of brilliant representation for trans people, for other LGBT people, and it isn't afraid to shy away as well from transphobia within LGBT circles, while still remaining like quite a light and fun story in places. Even though it deals with some quite dark themes, there was a lot of joy and a lot of hope and discovery in this, which I really like. And I love the character of Felix so much. I just want to like protect. Look at this beautiful cover. I love the setting. It's set in New York in an art school, and it's about Felix, who is a young person questioning their own kind of identity, discovering what labels they want to use for themselves, and they currently identify at the beginning of the book as a trans man. Not only was the representation amazing, the story itself was really compelling. It kept me wanting to like turn the pages. I didn't know where it was going next. I didn't feel like it was a totally predictable YA book. Not that there's anything wrong with like a normal kind of formulaic plot if it's done really well, but this I think had a few twists and turns I wasn't expecting. There are 2 kind of main ships or main romances you could ship, I think, with Felix in this book. One is kind of like friends to lovers and one is more enemies to lovers. So if you're interested in that, I would recommend. Other books I really love this year include On the Come Up by Angie Thomas. I talk a lot about that in my 7 books in 7 days vlog, so check that out. Also Seconds by Bryan Lee O'Malley, which is a graphic novel by the same author of the Scott Pilgrim series. I need to read the Scott Pilgrim series as well. This was actually so stunning, and this is going to be an answer to another one of my questions, so I'm going to talk more about it in a minute. Another book I really love this year, Girl, Woman, Other by Bernadine Evaristo. This is just a stunning representation of Black British women. It's an exploration of intersectionality, of intergenerational trauma, and the experiences of many different Black women in Britain across the generations. I also just found it really stunning, really compelling. I would really recommend this if you're looking for an adult book exploring these themes. Next, and finally, and probably my favourite of the year, is The Binding by Bridget Collins. This might be one of my favourite books of all time. I was really stunned by it. I loved the premise of it. I talk about it a bit more in one of my other videos, which I'll link in the corner if you want to have a look and if you want to know more about what I thought of it. This one is about a kind of Victorian-esque world with a magical realism concept at the centre of it, that books can contain memories. And I think that's all I want to say. But if you've read this, you know. It's stunning. Question number 2. Best sequel that you've read this year. I've read only 2 sequels this year. I reread one of my teenage favourites, The Amber Spyglass by Philip Pullman. This is the last in the His Dark Materials trilogy. It's mad, it's wacky, it goes into places beyond anything the first 2 books had. It explores some very dark concepts. It breaks your heart. Lyra and Will, we know what I'm talking about. This series is always going to be like one of my all-time favourite series. The other sequel that I read this year, The Mirror and the Light by Hilary Mantel, which is again the 3rd part and the concluding part of her Wolf Hall trilogy, which is a series about Thomas Cromwell, who was an advisor to Henry VIII, and a really detailed account of his life all the way through to his death. Hilary Mantel is a stunning writer. She has such close observations on life. I talk a lot more about this in another one of my videos, but I think these two, I can't pick between these two. I might go with the Amber Spyglass because it is just an all-time classic, despite the massive achievement that Hilary Mantel has made by writing these books. The next question, what is a new release on your TBR that you are excited to read? So this is about a new release that is currently on my TBR. Two books that I can think of I really need to read. Salt by Catrin Kean. Thank you, Catrin, again for sending me this one. This is by a Welsh author and it's a story about Welsh Black history and I'm excited to read it. And also, the other new release I'm really excited for is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. This one is an imagined story of the life of Shakespeare's son, Hamnet, who obviously could have been the inspiration for Hamlet. This premise really intrigues me and I'm excited. Question 4. Most anticipated new release. I'm not very good at... I keep hitting that lamp. I'm not very good at keeping up with new releases, so the only one I can think of, might be a bit embarrassing, is A Midnight Sun by Stephenie Meyer. Now, obviously, I grew up in the era of Twilight fan craziness, and obviously we've all kind of reevaluated Twilight since and seen its many, many flaws. Nevertheless, the teenage part of me is kind of excited for Midnight Sun, and kind of excited to maybe rip it apart if it's as awful as the example chapters that were leaked way back when. But maybe Stephenie Meyer has matured and changed as an author and maybe this will be a different kind of book and that's why I'm excited about this one. I'm also just excited to talk about it with other people because it's definitely going to be a point of contention. Next, question 5. Biggest disappointment of the year. I think this one might have to be... Hold on. So, ironically, I had to search for this book. It is Find Me by Aciman. I'm so sad. I loved Call Me By Your Name, particularly the film, which I saw before I actually read the book, and this was a real disappointment. I just felt that the relationship that it focused on, which is the relationship of Elio, who is the main character in Call Me By Your Name, his father, and a relationship with a new woman who isn't Elio's mother, who is much younger than him. It just wasn't what I think anyone wanted to hear about. It felt very cliche, and there's something about that kind of story with an older man and a younger woman that we've seen a lot before, that kind of insta-love, and it's just not interesting. I don't think it's not nearly as interesting as the relationship between Elio and Oliver, which is complex, and so I was very disappointed with that part of the book. Second part of the book, the shorter part, it was good. It was fine. It was a nice kind of conclusion to their story, but the rest of this, big disappointment. Biggest surprise is the next question. I think that would have to be Seconds by Bryan Lee O'Malley. I told you it was coming back. I had basically no expectations going into this. It was recommended by a friend. I haven't read many graphic novels. I knew kind of it was by Scott Pilgrim's author, so I knew the kind of tone it would go into, but I did not expect it to floor me. I did not expect it to make me cry, and for it to be such a relatable and beautiful story. So in a good way, this was a big surprise. This is about Katie, who is a... Is it Katie or Kate? Katie, who is a chef who runs her own restaurant, who starts trying to open another restaurant, and she has some troubles in her life. She has some relationship troubles. One night she is visited by a mysterious spirit and shenanigans ensue, is all I will say. Just read it. It's so good. Question 7. Favourite new author? I've got so many because I've been reading so many new authors this year. The main 4 that I have are Kacen Callendar, who wrote Felix Ever After, Angie Thomas, who wrote On the Come Up, Bernadine Evaristo, who wrote Girl, Woman, Other, and Bridget Collins, who wrote The Binding. So basically all of the authors for my favourite books of this year. Absolute legends. I'm so excited to read more of their work. Question 8. Newest fictional crush. I've seen a lot of people, when they get to this point, getting a bit stuck and being like, oh, I don't know. I have a lot of fictional crushes, okay? They may be like small crushes, but so I would have to say Declan from Felix Ever After might be a controversial opinion. Anybody else agree with me here? Maybe continuing on a similar theme, Lucy and Darnie from The Binding. Definitely a similar theme going on here, isn't there? On a slightly different tangent, Hazel from Seconds is so cute. And let's not forget Sai from Upright Women Wanted. Such a crush. My favourite character from this year, probably Felix from Felix Ever After. I think I've talked so much about this book in this tag, but there's a reason why. Felix is such a babe, and I will protect him from everyone and everything. Book that made you cry. Probably All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. This book is a memoir of George M. Johnson, who is a queer man and an LGBTQIA+ activist in the US. And it's kind of a memoir of his life, and there are some very traumatic experiences that he goes through and also that the people around him go through. But there is also a lot of positive and heartwarming stories in there as well. And it's really about him navigating the intersectionalities of being black and being queer. There's a particular story in here that made me cry. That was about his transgender cousin, which I won't spoil, but that really touched me. And also, as I already mentioned, Seconds made me cry as well. Next, a book that made you happy. Felix Ever After, obviously. And also Her Royal Highness by Rachel Hawkins. Sweet, fluffy, lovely female-female romance. Just cute and heartwarming and totally free of trauma and angst. The most beautiful book that I've bought this year would have to either be, as seems to be an answer to every question, Felix Ever After, because look how gorgeous is that cover, oh my god. But also Hamnet, which I haven't read yet, as mentioned. But look at this gorgeous gold foiling. I just think that's beautiful. The inner page, how pretty. Even the hardback underneath has gorgeous gold foiling as well. I'm slightly in love with that. Another candidate would be The Mirror and the Light, because I think this cover is gorgeous. Inner page. What an interesting choice. It just seems so anachronistic, but I love it. And that on the inside page. Finally, what books do you need to read this year? Everything. If you look at my TBR on Goodreads, which will be linked down below, you can see everything that I've got on my TBR, my to be read list, all of the books that I'm keen to read. There are hundreds of books on there. There is so much stuff that I really, really want to read. I think my focus this year is going to be on trying to read from a new range of authors and perspectives that I haven't read from before, particularly on Black authors and queer authors. I really want to read some more Welsh authors as well, and the intersection of all of those things. The great thing about Goodreads is it helps you to keep track of what you're reading and get like an overall picture so that you can know, what are the gaps in my reading this year? What could I be reading more of? And keep track of that as you go along. So I hope you enjoyed this tag. This is really fun to make. Consider giving it a like, consider subscribing, consider commenting below. It all helps to combat the YouTube algorithm. If you're stuck for a comment, let me know what your favourite book that you've read this year is, or what book that you are really, really keen to read. Let me know. Love you all. Bye.